I am on the top of Torn Monument in the Hudson Valley in New York, about a mile away from West Point. And if you could see the spectacular 360-degree views that I see right now, you would just have your breath taken away. I mean, the weather is perfect. The sky is blue. Hudson River is down below me. I see miles and miles in every direction. And each of these rocks that I'm sitting on tells a really, really special story. But before I tell you about these rocks, I want to tell you about this Audible book that I've just been devouring this past month. I've been listening to lots of books on theology and spirituality, books about the Bible, books about Ram Dass, and I felt like I needed a little bit of a break from the nonfiction works. And so I hopped on Audible looking for a fiction book, and I found this book that normally I would have never picked up something like this, but the reviews were just spectacular. I mean, 4.9, 30,000 reviews, raving fans. I said, you know what? Let me give this book a try. And the Audible book is called Dungeon Crawler Carl. And before you go out and buy it, I need to warn you, if you're into this type of work, you may end up in a never-ending hole of reading these books because there is no end. It's just a series that just keeps going and going and going. I think they have 8 or 9 books out now, and it's continuing. But the premise is that aliens come to Earth, and they turn Earth into a series of dungeons. And this guy named Carl and all the few surviving millions of people on Earth, they have to fight their way through this dungeon. And each level, the levels go down. So, they start at underneath the Earth, and then they go down and down and down. Each level becomes more difficult. They have more challenges. More people die along the way. And it's just this fight for survival. And it really reminds me of Dante's Inferno. If you haven't read Dante's Inferno or forget the premise, Dante's Inferno is this allegory about what hell is. And each level of hell is where, God or whoever or the devil puts different sinners. And the further you go down in the levels of hell, the worse things get. And that's kind of the premise of Dungeon Crawl Carl, because every level of the dungeon that he fights through gets worse and worse and worse, and more humans are lost along the way. Now, fair warning, the book is raunchy, rated R, lots of profanity, but if you're into video games, the book is written like a video game. The voice acting is absolutely phenomenal. It's amazing that it's one person voicing the whole thing. And it's just a fun, lighthearted, action-packed, PG-13 plus type work. But reading this book has really made me think a lot this week about what is suffering, what is hell, what is devil, what is evil, where does all this stuff come from? And I'm sitting on top of Torn Mountain today because just like how in the book I just talked about, humans are thrown into this impossible situation where they need to do their best, where they need to fight for survival, try to maintain their values and camaraderie towards each other as the world turns on them. Each of these stones represents a fallen soldier or a fallen first responder. And for example, this is Second Lieutenant Emily Perez. She was at West Point when I was there, a beautiful African-American leader, just a stud, a phenomenal leader in every regard. And about a year after graduating, she was killed in action, and she was one of the first female West Pointers killed in the global war on terror. And every stone here, I'll show you, there's hundreds of stones, hundreds of them piled on top of each other. Many of the names I recognize. Each one represents a fallen soldier, a fallen policeman, a fallen firefighter, and there's lots of sadness in this pile of rocks. People draw or write names on these rocks, and then they carry them up the mountain and put them on this monument. And while it's very sad, I know that the process of carrying these rocks up is a very healing for lots of people. And I carried a rock up today, and I was thinking about who do I want to dedicate my rock to, since I know so many people. And I dedicated it to my uncles who served in the military, the Crapanzanos, who some passed away before my time that I never got to meet. And so I dedicated my rock today to them. But this begs a deeper question. The question I mentioned before is, where does suffering and evil come from? And I've entertained this question a lot. People have asked me this question a lot. It's one of the most difficult theological questions, because if God is everything, why would God make suffering? Why would he make children die of disease? Why would he make war, he or she? And it's a very difficult question. And what I've found, I posted about this earlier this week, is many times we as society externalize evil, right? If you go back to the Adam and Eve in the book of Genesis, the snake, I don't know how deep I want to go today, but the snake in the garden was not originally presented as the devil or Satan. That came much, much later in theology. In the beginning, the snake in the garden was just a snake. He was just a serpent. And he just told Eve a matter of fact. He said, oh, you can't eat the fruit? Well, if you eat the fruit, you won't die. You'll just become as knowledgeable as God. And Eve, in her desire to be as knowledgeable as God, ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And then she convinced Adam to eat the fruit. And then when Adam and Eve were confronted by God, and God asked them, why did you do that? What did they do? Adam, instead of just accepting responsibility, he blamed Eve, and he said it was all her fault. And then when God turned to Eve and asked Eve, why'd you eat the fruit? Eve blamed the serpent and said it was all his fault. He deceived me. But if you read the text, the serpent never deceived Eve. The serpent just told Eve matter-of-factly, you won't die if you eat the fruit. You'll just become as knowledgeable as God, or you'll gain knowledge, or something to that effect. But over and over again, throughout history, human nature externalizes evil and says evil needs to exist out there because we humans are perfect. It can't be our fault that there's war. It can't be our fault that there's hatred and racism and sexism and all the isms. It has to be someone or something else's fault. So let's create this image of the devil, this red-horned demon that fell from heaven, Lucifer, and let's take all of the evil and suffering in the world and blame this entity. But if you read the Bible from front to back, what you find is the serpent was just a serpent. He wasn't Satan. He wasn't the devil. When the Bible goes on to talk about Lucifer, Lucifer is the king of Babylon. Lucifer is not some angel. He's just a king that was too prideful and fell from God's grace. It talks about the king of Tyre, who also was a king who fell from God's grace due to pride. And then later in the book of Job, when Job talks about Satan, Satan is an angel in God's court. And Satan is just one of many angels, and he's almost like this district attorney prosecutor, right? Where he looks at Job and he just says, have you done this, or will you do this? Or he kind of like, he's the accuser. That's what the word Satan means, the accuser, right? The prosecutor, the accuser. So he just challenges people on behalf of God. Satan is an angel of God for most of the Bible, which blows people's mind when they, think about that. And so when Satan confronts Jesus in the desert, Satan just says, well, if you're the Son of God, jump. Satan doesn't show up in the desert as this evil, deceiving demon. Satan shows up in the desert as a servant of God, willing or testing Jesus, challenging Jesus, challenging us, but Satan is doing God's work for most of the Bible. That is until you get to the book of Revelations, when in the book of Revelations, which honestly reads like a bad acid trip, right? Like the book of Revelations, in my opinion, I don't even know if it should have been included in the Bible, because it's so different than everything else. But it's a beautiful poetic book. But here's the thing: the book of Revelations collapses all of these entities: Lucifer, the serpent, Satan, the fallen angel, the dragon. It collapses all of these entities into one entity, which we know now as the devil. But up until the book of Revelations, that was never the case. And here's the thing you need to understand about the book of Revelations: the book of Revelations is forward in the future. The book of Revelations is not in the past. So even if you do believe that the book of Revelations is true and will come to fruition, that whole entire book is about future events, not the past. But I digress. I digress a lot. Here's the thing I'm trying to get, is that suffering, whatever you think of it, Satan, the devil, whatever you think of that entity, is really just an opportunity for us to come closer to God and to choose love over animosity, to choose love over hate. That is why evil and suffering exist. I'm in New York to visit some family members. While I'm here, coincidentally, my childhood best friend, his mother passed away, Maria Crocolucci. And so I'm going to her wake and her funeral as well. And I'm also going to a full moon ceremony at the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors. But it's hard. It's hard when we all suffer, right? I lost my mother recently. I know people that are suffering from disease, from illness, from losing their job. I know people that are suffering so much. People that are in combat action right now. All these hundreds of people behind me that lost their lives. And it's hard. It's easy to say that evil, something must be out there, because it can't be in here, because none of us would ever do anything like this. And it's difficult. It's really difficult. And this is a really big jump for lots of people, this jump that I'm about to make. One of my beliefs is this belief in non-duality. And the belief in non-duality is that, yes, we are living this human experience. Yes, I am Robert Solano, but I am also one. I am one with everything. I'm one with everyone. You watching this on the other side of the camera right now, it may not feel like it because there's this technology between us. There's this digital distance and maybe temporal distance between us. But we are one. And the separation is an illusion. It's a beautiful illusion. It's an illusion that we all choose to live, that we decide we want to live the illusion, which is why we came into human existence and separate from God in the first place, separate from oneness. But it's an illusion. And it's possible to hold these two realities at the same time. That yes, we are human, but yes, we are also one. And when you realize that we are all one, that you are the divine source, that you are God, that you are Jesus, yes, you, then the question doesn't become, why did God make suffering? Why did God make this heap of rocks that I'm sitting on and all the deaths that had to make this happen? Then the question becomes, why did I Why did I make this pile of rocks? What lesson am I trying to teach myself through this suffering? Why did I need to lose friends in combat and after combat? Why did I make suffering in this world? And what lesson am I trying to teach myself? And how do I need to show up differently so that I can show up in a more loving and present way? And I'll leave you with this, talking about Dungeon Crawl Carl and Dante's Inferno. If you read Dante's Inferno, the very lowest level of hell is where you find Satan. And Satan isn't sitting on a throne. Satan isn't wearing a crown. Satan is not the king of hell. Satan is one of the many entities that is frozen in ice, suffering and condemned to hell. And what is that lowest level of hell? The way Dante describes it, the way the Bible describes it, the way Jesus described it in whatever form you take. Hell, the lowest level of hell, is absence of God's love. That's it. Absence of God's love. Complete and utter absence of love. That is hell. And that love comes from within us. Us choosing love over and over and over again. Us receiving God's love. Us giving God's love. Us seeing God in every face we meet and showing up in a loving and present way is how we avoid ending up in Dante's Inferno. And in Dante's Paradise, the highest level of heaven that you can get to is the exact opposite. The exact opposite. The highest level of heaven is oneness with God's love. And there you have it. That is all of suffering, all of heaven and hell, all of the afterlife in a nutshell. And what does Jesus say in the book of John? Heaven is in your midst. You can choose to live in a state of God's love today. You don't have to wait until you die. You can choose to live in heaven today by choosing love over and over and over again. And every time there's suffering, every time there's evil in this world, every time you get pissed off at someone, responding to that with God's love is the answer. That's Satan doing God's work, testing you, seeing how you show up in response. And showing up with God's love that's the challenge. That's what God wants you to do. That's why God put you on this earth. That's why you created this beautiful place that we live in. There you have it, folks. A little bit longer sermon than normal, but this is a special place, and I want to take advantage of this special moment to dive into one of the most challenging theological topics out there. And so I hope you have a wonderful week. I hope you choose love every moment, every day. Choose love.